Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome from wherever you're joining today. My name is Susan, and I'm joined by Angie Judge.
Hi, everybody.
Today, we'll be talking all about data cleanup and Dexibit. But to begin with, I'll take you through a quick intro to Dexibit for anyone that might be new here. So if you're new, we do data analytics specifically for visitor attractions. This is for both cultural and commercial organizations, and our mission is to democratize data, and we do that by bringing together all sorts of data from around the visitor's experience in your venue's operations. So things like footfall, ticketing, CRM, point of sale, e-commerce, social web, weather, and so much more. I'll share my screen now to show you what that looks like in the product. So here is Dexibit. It is software as a service. You can invite as many users as you'd like, and you can build dashboards, reports, insights, and forecasts, which you can then turn into scheduled email reports at a click of a button. And in Dexibit, we have an extensive library of visualizations. To add one to your dashboard, you can simply search for the topic you're looking for and click Add to add it in. And this is an example dashboard, so you can see lots of different data coming together in these visualizations to get everything from very high-level data right down through to the very detailed data. And the data in this particular dashboard has been tidied up, but today Angie's going to take us through a few instances where data cleanup is common and how we can clean up data in the Data Explorer. So perhaps Angie, you could kick us off with telling us a bit more about who can clean up data in Dexibit.
Thanks, Susan. And well, answer to that is anyone. And I think one of the great things that we're going to look at today is Dexibit is very much a point and click self-service experience. And so whilst there's a lot of things that we do to automate data and to provide data concierge in the form of our success and business reviews to help you with getting started and operating things, it is the purpose that you've got full transparency and control, and you don't need to be a data analyst to do things like data cleansing. And today I thought we could take a look at a couple of different examples of how that manifests and what that looks like. And I thought we could start with sort of myth busting, one big thing that we often hear, which is I'm not ready to start with data analytics because my data is messy and I need to clean it up. And the big thing that we would say in this is that this is very much part of the process of coming on board with Dexibit, of working in the data analytics space, is that over time you address data cleansing. You do not need nice data to get started. That is very much the assumption, is that it will be dirty. And that's part of the job of building those beautiful, healthy foundations of data. So there's a couple of examples that we can talk through here. Let me just pull up a screen. So I've got some data here, and this is my ticketing mess, we're going to call it. And you can see there's quite a bit wrong with this picture. We can see already here, I'm looking at the number of tickets that I've got by the date on which the ticket was scheduled, and the country of the address as entered by the visitor. And oh my goodness, there's also, I've uploaded this data, there's also a typo in here. So there's a lot of sort of things wrong with this data for us to fix. And if we have a look through this, let's see what else we've got going on in this data. Oh dear, quite a bit. It's not looking very hot. Oh, that one's pretty clean. And this is not an unusual sort of situation for data as it comes in. And so what we want to do, let's go back to our country and start off with, is here we've got Canada, 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 spelt all different types of ways, and we've got the same happening in the United States as it happens in some of it. And this is quite a typical situation for some ticketing systems, or if I was looking at maybe some survey data, often things like address are fields that are maybe entered by a user, for example, if they're filling it out online. Now, a nice ticketing system might tidy this up and provide some standardization, but that doesn't always happen. And so sometimes we get in a variety of spellings and representations of a country, and that's not really helpful when I want to see quickly and easily what percentage of my visitors are from Canada. So what we're going to do is hop on over into the Data Explorer. Can you see that all right, Susan? Cool. And the Data Explorer is sort of taking us behind the scenes in Dexibit. Now, this isn't necessarily something that everybody wants to get into. This might be something that maybe your ticketing system administrator wants to get into, or maybe a database administrator if you have one. So somebody who's confident working around data, and this is something that will train your team up in as we get into data. And you've got access to the mapping of the domains, so how the sort of semantic layer emerges that unlocks all the value in Dexibit of recognizing visitors and revenue and so forth. But you also have access to every single data set that you've either uploaded or integrated into Dexibit. Let's have a look for our ticketing mess. Here it is here. Poor Google's showing up when I search for mess as well. And we will get into have a look at these sorts of records. Let's have a look at this data set and see what it looks like. So here we can see our Canada situation. So what we want to do, these are the different attributes of that are coming up from this little ticketing data set. And I say little because this is just an upload of some sample data. A typical ticketing system will have a lot more attributes involved. And a lot more records. I've only got a handful of a couple of dozen here. And the first thing that we wanted to do was to fix up that country where Canada is. Now, those that are interested in queries, this is one of my favorites. Ooh. So what I'm saying in this query, and you could write this in plain English and click the magic wands if you wanted to use your own words rather than type in a query. But I'm saying I'm using the function of distinct. So select, give me a list of all of the different countries that are involved when I run that query. And here we go. I can start to see, let's order these alphabetically. I can start to see all of the sort of variations of Canada that I've got. What I'm going to do now is open up my attribute. So I'm clicking on the dot, dot, dot next to address country. And here you can see all the information about this attribute. For example, you can see when this attribute came in from my original data set, it was just called country. And I've relabeled it address country because it's nice when you're a user to have all of your address details like country, state, city, zip code all together in a drop-down list showing alphabetically. So it's nice to sort of prepend them with address so that they show as a group. And I've also given it a description, and you'll remember that this description comes up for the user. It's a nice little prompt and explainer there to be able to prompt the user so that they can quickly access that. And also it comes up in the data dictionary here, which follows the user around so that they can sort of see, again, an explainer of the data, just making it easy for them to navigate data. And remember, we had that typo. Let's fix that up while we're here. It also gives us some information about, for example, the physical and logical type. I wouldn't worry too much about this if you're new to data, but this sort of defines, for example, if it's a dollar value, should it treat it as currency and display it as currency? If it's a date, we want to make sure that it's formatted correctly for use on time series. If it's a Boolean, for example, so true or false value, we want to treat it in that format and so forth. But what we're going to do today is focus here on its tag. Now we want to apply a transformation to this data. So we want to automatically transform this data to be able to handle this, visitor entry problem. And we can enter some notes here. we can say this data field is entered by the user and may require cleansing to make sure or to handle the user's data entry variances. And now we're going to come in and put in a little transformation query in here. And I think I'm going to go for something like this. So this is a little query statement which is saying when the address of the country looks like CAN, so anything that looks like Canada that's got anything before the word CAN and anything after the term CAN, then call it Canada. Otherwise, just call it whatever it was called in the beginning. And then we've got this little sort of bookmark on bookends on this statement. But I don't feel like that sort of captured everything, because I remember here we had CA and some other CNADA. So let's click the magic wand and see if AI can improve this for me. Here we go. This is probably a much better example. And it's quite nice. This is a very different way of handling this. So just for references, I'll paste in what I had. I had a like in this statement, which if I had, here's a pop quiz. Can we think of a country that has the letters CAN in it that's not Canada? Because if there is this, then the way that I'd written this query originally would capture that and call it Canada. I might need to quickly chat GPT to work out what the answer to that question is, or Susan can do that for us. But the way that the AI has suggested that this query is written to say when the address country is in this exact list, it's referencing the data that we have trained this AI on, so my data set here. And it's giving us a more precise way of capturing all of these variances. Pros and cons of this. The pro is that it's not going to accidentally title a country containing the letters CAN as Canada. Cons is if somebody comes up with a new novel way of spelling Canada that's not in this list, then it might not capture that, including capitalization when you're working with an list. You could use a combination of both if you wanted to, and maybe be a bit more specific than my CAN example. So maybe Canada, and that way capitalization in this sense wouldn't matter. But let's apply this change, and we'll go with this for now. Save that. We're going to go back to our dashboard, and you'll notice nothing's changed. We need to refresh because we've changed the structure of the database behind. And here we go, all tidied up. And you'll notice I only attacked the Canada example. And this is kind of a real life situation of how we might go through this, is we sort of leave everything else to other with our else statement that we had. Let's reopen that up. So we had else, just leave it as is. And that's quite handy because then we can sort of see what's left for us to clean up. And when we're doing data cleansing in real life, we would sort of use this quite iterative approach to start narrowing down on things. And if we're dealing with a huge data set with a lot of variances that we're cleaning up, we might sort of bucket everything else into other. If we didn't want to, if there was sort of low return on investment of capturing one ticket here and one ticket here of Slovenia or something that maybe had been spelt incorrectly, but we've only got one ticket, so who cares? So this is quite a nice way of doing that iteratively. So we might come back, for example, into our statement, and maybe we might sort of address this to add in US. I'm going to click this little button here just to format my code so I can make it a little bit clearer, because then I can see this is what I would do in a real life situation. As I would copy this and put it down in here and then create my new list. for United States. So I would then just replace those, and I could use my wand to do this as well, with my USA list. And then everything else goes in as it was. So we'll save that, we'll go back to our data set, take a look. Beautiful. And now it's all clean. And so that's a really quick way to have some cleaning up of data. And there are other ways to do it as well. So for example, we looked at, I think it was it ticket type, Susan? We had some adults. Now we might want to keep this because this is kind of useful to know that there is an adult weekend return, because the weekend return might be important information. We might need to calculate visitation, that we count this ticket twice, or check if it's been redeemed twice. So in this case, rather than doing a transformation, we might do a derived metric. So you'll notice that the address country field that we were tackling before, because we've applied this transformation here and we've changed the actual attribute, although we can always just remove this and it will disappear and go back to its original state. So we haven't changed the raw data, we've changed a version of that. And that transformations have been applying dynamically on the fly as we call that data. But for that type, so let's go and change here. We'll just pull up that type data. So for that type, we probably don't want to take that approach because we want to keep that original in place. So here you'll see for address country, that transformation is showing up here as a green tag just to indicate, hey, this data is being transformed. And you can see as well on our attribute list, you can see it's clearly badged as that transformed data, and it just alerts the user to know, hey, this data has been changed from the way that it originally came in, and that way the user can make their way in and discover the traceability of that change if they desire to have a look into it. And that's why having notes can be useful, so that your everyday person can see what's happening here. And for the type, to handle this situation, what we might do is add in a derived metric instead. And we might say type simplified, for example. And we'll relate that to who the visitor was, categorized at a high level, or something like that. If I can spell that word. And here we might come in and say case when type like adult, then adult, else type end, something like that. We can use the magic wand just to check that I've got the syntax correct on this. Oh, it's stressed it up a little bit for me too. And that will give us, let's add that one in, that will give us an additional field that is giving us, saying that these are all adults, so that if we want to look at, our visitors by age range, we can see, hey, these are all adults. But if we still want to go back to see, well, which ones of them came on the weekend versus not, that need to be counted, that particular ticket offer that needs to be counted twice, we've still got that original field available in its raw context easily. So a couple of different approaches to solve the same problem. And a third way to do it is with something like the zip code. We can actually come in and do an enrichment here. So enrichment means when we're adding data from another source to be able to improve in the data and add value to the data that we're looking at here. And one of the out-of-the-box enrichments that we do for ticketing integrations and other integrations that involve zip or postal codes is we take the post zip code records. So, like for example, in the US, this is something called FIPS, FIPS, and enrich the zip or postal code to the US standard postal code set. And what that means is that if we then want to put that zip code on a choropleth or a nice chart of the US geographically, we know that that data is nice and clean because zip codes can be notoriously dirty to handle. A couple of other things to watch out for when you're doing data cleansing, we saw these in our zip codes actually, is getting into things like null values or where things are blank or when they're just incorrect and they'll have to be, there's no way of knowing what the zip code should be. So they'll just have to be labeled as other or incorrect. So this is a case where I might want to have a derived metric just to capture some of these scenarios and label them clearly as other or null or blank or whatever the case might be, so that it's clear, for example, if I'm looking at zip codes, that, hey, 50% of my visitors are coming from '09 and '08 zip codes here, but that doesn't represent necessarily all of the zip codes that I've got, because I'm only looking, if I'm looking at all my valid zip codes, I'm only looking at a portion of those. So for example, I could use the filter to say that I want to exclude um, my address zip is not equal to this. Ooh, for example, and take out those ones where it was blank. Um, uh, and I could say, or null. Oh, I didn't pull that out. Let's say not like null. Rookie errors happening here. And we can say, or address zip is not null, or where it's actually blank, rather than just containing the term. Let's use this here. And we can start to slim down this data set. So we can say, okay, well, it looks like half is actually out of the zip code '09, but that's not half of all my visitors. That's just half of the clean data set. So it might be helpful to sort of have a derived metric or a transformation to capture all of these scenarios where the address zip code doesn't fall into that standard set and sort of label it as other or not present. And one last one that I wanted to talk about was getting into um, point of sale. So this is a really common situation that we get into for like retail products or food and beverage products, where sometimes the categories haven't been tagged properly in the source system. So for example, we might want to have a look at the food and beverage point of sale transactional data based on whether it's alcohol or not alcohol, or food versus beverage. And we might not have those tags either available in the point of sale system, or nobody's sort of taken the time to put them in originally, or maybe we did that once, but we haven't kept it up to date. So the data is pretty patchy when it comes to that. You can use the same approach to very quickly solve that problem, and including the AI, because the AI is trained on that data. So if you wanted to say, for example, go through and say, well, if the product name is like burger, then it's food. And if the product name is like beer, then it's alcohol. And so this is one of the really great things, is that that is something that would take minutes, as opposed to asking someone to do an audit of thousands of SKUs in a point of sale system and tag them all individually, which might take them days or weeks to accomplish. So, Susan, that's the very quick guide to data cleansing in Dexibit, and I'm going to go off and keep cleaning up my data.
Thank you, Angie. I've got one question before we head off, and
Yeah,
that
sure.
how often should we be checking whether or not our data needs to be cleaned?
That's a really great question. And I think when it comes to overall data integrity, that's definitely something that you want to have a good routine around. And we would suggest at least having some great checks on at least a 6 monthly basis, but ideally you'd have a few light checks on maybe a monthly basis or whatever your financial reporting cycle is. And when it comes to data cleansing for some of these auxiliary things like zip codes, for example, or products or types, I think this is just something to watch for in your reporting. And maybe you might actually tolerate a little bit of dirtiness in your data because there's always going to be some um, uh, of new things that might pop up and sort of new ways that your data is being used, and then sort of do a wholesale cleanup. Or because it's so quick and easy, if it is something that you want to maintain a level of perfection over, you can just jump in and do it. This sort of thing only takes a couple of minutes to accomplish. So it's something that you could jump in and do in the moment, and instantly it will be available to all of your users in Dexibit. So it really depends on what kind of rhythms and cycles you see. And it's what always surprises me is this is like the living, breathing machine that is data. There are new things that pop up all the time. And for example, we saw in some of our ticket products, we had like general admission 2023, general admission 2024. So you think you've cleaned everything up, and then 2026 rolls around and we've got something new to think about. So there's a degree to which we can pre-plan some of the things we might see in data. And then there's like what people actually do when they're doing system administration, other systems, and coming up with new naming conventions for us to fix it.
Thank you so much, Angie. And thank you to everyone who's joined today. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar next month.
See you
Bye.
later.